Today I want to look at managing soil fertility. In order to crop a wide range of vegetables and get good plant growth, you need to keep your soil really healthy. And what we're going to really look at is how to feed the soil rather than feeding the plants, although we will look at a couple of homemade plant foods. But mostly we need to think about adding nitrogen and carbon and rich organic matter into our soil, because this helps beneficial bacteria populations in the soil, and it helps to hold moisture in the soil, and it helps to add releasable plant nutrients into the soil in the root zone. And I'm looking here at my compost heap, and I've sort of created a recipe here because it is a bit like baking a cake. Here we've got the sort of binding ingredients, the high carbon material, and if we want to just put that simply, it's all the brown sort of dead plant matter, maybe even slightly woody material. But here I've got a pile of straw actually that's come out of the chicken hutch, because we've just cleaned out the chickens. High carbon material like straw needs a big population of bacteria or fungi to break down the high carbon content of the dry brown material. And so you need to balance that out with something that's very, very green, because this is high in nitrogen. This will feed the populations of bacteria and fungi that will help to break down your dry strawy matter. And what you get here is a really balanced combination. I've just been looking at a little pile of soil, garden soil, that I've put on top of there, because this is the active ingredient. To introduce those bacteria and fungi, you need a little bit of soil or manure or something that's already activated with these living organisms that help to break down our compost heap. And without any one of these ingredients, you'll end up with a very flat heap, or a heap that doesn't decompose easily. So you need to have a good balance of everything to get that lovely rich organic matter out of at the end of the year. You'll also need air in that mixture, so we've made a big 2-bay compost bin here, so that we can keep turning it over and aerating it. As the material starts to break down, it slumps and it fills up all the air gaps. And I use this, I spread this on my vegetable plots just before I cultivate them in the spring. It takes about a year really to get good compost going. Here I'm showing clover in the lawn. It's okay to have clover in the lawn. In fact, it's beneficial. Clover is a legume, and it's one of those plants that are able to add nitrogen to the soil by providing a host for beneficial bacteria that actually fix atmospheric nitrogen and make it in a form that plants can actually take up, because they can't take it straight out of the atmosphere. Peas and beans, here's my pea and bean bed, we saw this the other day. They do exactly the same thing, and we use this in our rotation to build up the nitrogen levels in the soil, and then we can follow it with high nitrogen requiring plants such as the brassicas, or we can use the beans and peas to replace nitrogen after a brassica point in the cycle. So it's very, very important to work with nature's systems when we're looking at an organic or permaculture system. Here's actually a close-up of some nodules that were on my pea plants last year, and you can see these are little, what we call them nodules, are little invasions of the root system by the beneficial bacteria, but it's a dually beneficial relationship. It's symbiotic. You can also make your own fertilizers using nettles, comfrey, or really any high nitrogen plant that will break down and release nutrients into the water. You make it as a sort of tea. It takes about 3 to 4 weeks. But again, it's okay to have nettles in your garden. They're a sign of fertility, and they can be made into a useful plant food. Incidentally, I'm just looking at Jack by the hedge here. This is sometimes known as poor man's garlic. It has a sort of very garlicky flavour, and it's one of those foraging plants you can use, as well as nettles. I mean, we make nettle soup frequently. It's lovely. One of the main things is when you've got your nettle liquid after 3 or 4 weeks, maybe a little longer, don't forget to dilute it at least 1 in 10. It is way too strong as it is naturally. If you've got animals, you can use the manure. We add it to the compost heap because chickens don't create that much manure. But if you've got horses, donkeys, goats, obviously they're a good source of rich organic matter that can be composted and then used to nourish the soil. Interestingly, um, one of the other key areas where we get nitrogen in the soil is during a thunderstorm. The electricity actually breaks down the bond in the nitrogen, in the atmospheric nitrogen, and it actually bonds with the water molecules and rains down to the earth. And this is why we get a really good growth phase straight after a period of thunderstorms. Um, Another thing to be aware of is your soil pH, and whether it's acid or alkaline. Alkaline soils tend to lock up nutrients, and this can make it harder to feed your plants effectively, because even if you keep adding fertilizers, the nutrients can get locked up with the calcium in the soil. So the ideal soil pH is about 6.5. That's where most nutrients are available. And it's worth looking at your soil pH and seeing if you can adjust it by using different types of organic matter and lime to balance that pH to an ideal 6.5.